Strive Masiyiwa was born in 1961 in southern Rhodesia, modern-day Zimbabwe, during a period of deep political unrest under Ian Smith's white minority regime. Fearing persecution for opposing the regime, his family fled to Zambia when he was just 7, leaving behind their home, community, and livelihood. Exiled from his homeland, Masiyiwa grew up immersed in tales of struggle and resilience that shaped his worldview. His academic journey led him to Scotland and then Wales, where he earned a degree in electrical and electronic engineering from the University of Wales. But shortly after Zimbabwe finally gained its independence, Masiyiwa made a defining decision to return home and help rebuild the nation. This pivotal choice would mark the beginning of his entrepreneurial journey. Upon returning to Zimbabwe, he secured a job as an engineer at the state-owned Posts and Telecommunications Corporation. Despite this stable job, he quickly realized that true impact and growth would not come from within the confines of a government institution. Yet, his first entrepreneurial steps were driven not by a grand vision, but by immediate need. In 1986, he sought to build a house, but found that his employer's loan was insufficient. The estimates he received were nearly double the amount of the loan he was granted, pushing his dream out of his grasp. Determined, he considered building it himself but lacked experience. This obstacle sparked an idea. If he couldn't do it alone, he could create a company that could. With just $75 in savings from his monthly salary, Masiyiwa took the first step into business, founding Retrofit Engineering in 1987. However, securing clients and materials with such a small investment was a significant challenge. So, he relied on word of mouth, local newspaper ads, and even used his mother's home phone as the business line. He hustled relentlessly to secure clients and materials. To manage costs, he took on small renovation projects that required minimal upfront expenses while building a reputation for reliability and quality. The early projects were modest, home renovations and minor construction work. But as Zimbabwe's construction boom continued, so did his opportunities. Within a few years, Retrofit Engineering had grown into employing over 100 people and handling major electrical installation projects. Within its client database, the Zimbabwean government was the largest. By the early 1990s, Masiyiwa was recognized as Zimbabwe's Businessman of the Year. They secured major contracts, sensitive projects for the armed forces, and even President Mugabe's rural home. This attracted the interest of the Central Intelligence Organization. The government was growing wary of prominent black entrepreneurs, especially those with international connections and access to foreign funding. Harassing these black businessmen were frequent. Then came Masiyiwa's turn to be harassed. He was abducted by the Central Intelligence Organization, subjected to hours of interrogation about his venture's funding and alleged American support, and threatened with death. Thankfully, the intervention of relatives and lawyers secured his release. Afterward, the CIO continued its harassment, following and periodically pulling him in for questioning. This constant surveillance made him feel like a marked man. The 1990s brought with them mobile technology, and Masiyiwa understood quickly that this could leapfrog Africa's crumbling infrastructure and revolutionize connectivity. More importantly, exploring it with Retrofit would allow crucial diversification away from government business. But it was a real stretch. You have to know, at the time, Zimbabwe's telephone penetration rate was below 1%, and the phone network was severely underdeveloped. 14 years on a waiting list for a landline underdeveloped. This severe lack of connectivity convinced Masiyiwa that wireless technology was the fastest and most practical solution to bridge the communication gap across the continent. To seize this opportunity, he initially approached the state-owned Posts and Telecommunications with the idea of forming a joint venture with Retrofit Engineering, but they flatly rejected his proposal, mocking mobile phones as a passing fad for the elite. Still, undeterred, he decided to spin off the telecommunications side of Retrofit into a new entity, Econet Wireless Zimbabwe. This would allow him to focus exclusively on pursuing the mobile telecommunications opportunity, independent of the constraints and resistance. So he thought. He applied for a license to establish a private mobile network, which was rejected by the government, unwilling to relinquish its monopoly. However, this resistance only strengthened his resolve. Masiyiwa chose to fight. He launched a grueling legal battle against the Zimbabwean government that would drag on for years and nearly cost him everything. In 1993, Strive Masiyiwa embarked on what would become one of Africa's most significant entrepreneurial struggles. His vision to establish a mobile telecommunication company in Zimbabwe and directly challenging the state-owned telecommunications corporation was now in front of the court and the public. The odds were incredibly uneven. Masiyiwa stood virtually alone against the full force of the Zimbabwean government and its entrenched monopolistic control. A senior advocate warned him that challenging the government's stance would be as difficult as stealing a tank and driving it into the center of the city. But Strive ignored these warnings and assembled a legal team. After 6 months of legal proceedings, they achieved their first victory. The High Court ruled in Masiyiwa's favor, ordering the PTC to grant him the necessary frequencies. But this victory was short-lived. The PTC immediately appealed to the Zimbabwe Supreme Court, which overturned the lower court's decision only 5 months later. However, he received crucial advice by someone who remains unnamed in the history books. He could challenge the PTC's monopoly on constitutional grounds, citing Section 20 of Zimbabwe's constitution, which guaranteed the right to receive and impart information without hindrance. With the support of advocate Adrian de Bourbon, Masiyiwa made the unprecedented decision to sue the government in the Constitutional Court, a special court that rarely assembled. As the legal battle intensified, political pressure mounted. Government officials attempted to persuade Masiyiwa to abandon his challenge and accommodate politically connected individuals in his venture. The government also worked to extend the monopoly through new legislation and bureaucratic maneuvers. Despite these obstacles, Masiyiwa remained determined to secure the license through the legal proceedings. After relentless legal struggles, the pivotal moment arrived on December 1995. The Constitutional Court delivered its landmark ruling, striking down the state monopoly in telecommunications held by the PTC, fundamentally altering Zimbabwe's telecommunications landscape. Masiyiwa and his team had successfully argued that the PTC's monopoly contravened Article 20 of the Zimbabwean Constitution. The ruling established several groundbreaking precedents. First, it unequivocally stated that the PTC could not prevent other players from entering the telecommunications field, directly dismantling the legal barrier that had blocked Econet Wireless from operating. More profoundly, it established telecommunications access as a constitutional right, recognizing that in the modern era, telecommunications infrastructure is essential for citizens to exercise their right to freely receive and share information. But despite this victory, the price of challenging the government turned out to be enormous for Masiyiwa, his family, and most notably, retrofit engineering. You see, as the legal battle progressed, economic persecution against him intensified, particularly affecting retrofit. The government's hostility got more blatant, which resulted in the loss of lucrative government contracts, refusal to pay for completed work, and orders for Masiyiwa to leave government sites. Faced with this deteriorating business environment and the potential loss of over 1,000 jobs, Masiyiwa made the heartbreaking decision to sell the company in 1996. 10 years of hard work vanished. Through all of his ordeal, Masiyiwa relied heavily on his faith, and the Christian community in Zimbabwe widely prayed and fasted in support of him during his legal battles. He has openly credited prayer and his relationship with God as essential sources of strength during this period. The path from constitutional victory to actual licensing remained fraught with obstacles. The Supreme Court, in line with the Constitutional Court's decision, ordered the Minister of Information to grant Econet a license by the end of February 1997. But despite this clear directive, the government continued to resist through bureaucratic maneuvering and political interference. When the government finally initiated a tender process for a second cellular license, Econet participated but was initially unsuccessful. The license was awarded to Telecel. Undeterred, Masiyiwa's legal team challenged the tender process in the High Court, alleging corruption and bias. They obtained a court order to seize and seal the documents used by the adjudicating committee, which revealed evidence of manipulation favoring Telecel. In December 1997, in another significant victory, the High Court revoked the license awarded to Telecel and ruled that it should be granted to Econet. and in July 1998, after 5 years of legal battles, Strive Masiyiwa finally launched Econet Wireless Zimbabwe. With the legal battle finally behind him, Strive Masiyiwa could at last focus on Econet's real mission, connecting Zimbabwe to the world. But the end of the courtroom fight was just the beginning of a new set of challenges. First up, money. Building a telecom company isn't cheap. Econet needed millions in equity, with no profits expected for years. Imported equipment alone would eat up a fortune. Local banks wanted no part of the project, even going as far as calling the plan insane. Masiyiwa was left with two risky options: look abroad for funding or take the company public on the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange. Despite being considered inexperienced in an industry that barely existed in Africa, he told his team, "Let's give it a try." Timing was everything. Econet launched its commercial service during the World Cup final in July 1998, leveraging the excitement of a global event to make a splash. And the response was explosive. Before Econet even opened its doors, 30,000 people were already waiting to sign up. Years of frustration with the government monopoly had created massive pent-up demand. By the end of its first year, Econet had over 63,000 subscribers, but success didn't mean peace. Government pressure lingered as state security continued to harass the company. Public and political scrutiny became a daily reality, yet Econet thrived. Masiyiwa's vision of connecting people against the odds was working. That bruising 5-year legal war shaped Masiyiwa's approach. He learned to value quiet progress over public spectacle, a silent strategy that would define his next moves. After the storm in Zimbabwe, Masiyiwa expanded carefully across Africa. He entered Botswana, Lesotho, and Nigeria, each with its own unique challenges, but without the noisy legal battles of the past. In 2000, he relocated to South Africa, putting distance between himself and Zimbabwe's political turbulence. He also restructured Econet Wireless Group to operate outside Zimbabwe's economic chaos, giving the business room to grow. Masiyiwa kept a low profile, building alliances with governments and investors rather than chasing headlines. Econet quietly expanded into Europe and the Americas, moving into telecom infrastructure and satellite services. As Econet was now established, he began to diversify. He launched Cassava FinTech, participating in the revolution that is mobile payments with platforms like EcoCash, giving millions of Africans access to financial services for the first time. He also invested in media, energy, and other sectors vital to Africa's future. Notably, he poured resources into philanthropy, especially education. Through the Higher Life Foundation, he and his wife, Tsitsi, have provided scholarships for over 250,000 African students. Eventually, Masiyiwa moved to London, not as a retreat, but as a launchpad for global expansion. The city's financial ecosystem gave him access to capital, talent, and regulatory stability, allowing him to oversee operations across continents while maintaining his trademark discretion. Building from the shadows has its trade-offs. Masiyiwa's low profile shields him from political attacks and lets him focus on long-term growth. But it also means his impact is often overlooked outside business circles. Unlike high-profile tycoons, Masiyiwa's influence is subtle, but his role in shaping Africa's economic and technological future is undeniable.